The story begins with a magical ceremony in a stadium full of gods, as an overly excited host announces a challenge for a rookie god named Rista. She receives an S-class world that needs to be saved, and once she fulfills the task, she will be promoted to a full-fledged goddess. She graciously thanks them for the task, but immediately freaks out after the ceremony. Rista was born into the realm of gods 100 years ago, and she has summoned heroes from Earth to save different worlds from disaster 5 times, which is nothing when compared to the other gods. But she thinks an S-class world would make even the veteran gods nervous, and she freaks out again. She gathers herself, and begins to search for a hero, and settles on choosing a hero from Japan, since the Japanese seem to love books about reincarnation, making it easier for the hero to understand why he is summoned on such short notice. But after 7 Suzukis, 8 Yamadas, and 6 Sasakis, Rista gives up, and she throws the papers in the air. She leans backward a little too much, and falls on the floor, making the papers fly out of her hand. However, one form sticks onto her face, and when she looks at it, she is shocked to see the guy is only level 1, yet his stats are ridiculously high. Rista rubs her eyes to ensure she read it correctly, and dances in joy because she has found a hero with 1 in a million talent. Rista is sure that the guy will be able to save her S-class world, G-Brand. She dances all the way to the summoning ground, believing that her dream of becoming a full-fledged goddess will finally come true. She immediately draws a summoning circle, and puts the chalk back in her brassiere. She chants an incantation, and summons Raigwen Seiya, the hero she chose to fulfill her dream. Suddenly a bright light flashes, and quickly vanishes, and amidst the smoke there is a man sitting in a bubble. Seiya looks at Rista, who is already drooling over his hot looks. He stands 180 centimeters tall and has a thick black mane and a ripped body, and Rista can't help but blush at how handsome he is. She quickly fixes her hair, as she lets her perverted dreams about developing a passionate romance with him cloud her mind, but remembers that a romance between a god and a human is forbidden. She composes herself, and turns to introduce herself. She tells Seiya that he has been chosen as the hero who will save an S-class world G-Brand from the Demon Lord. As she waits for him to say something, Rista thinks her good looks and charms have enchanted Seiya, which is probably why he is staring at her so intently. But he bursts her bubble by calling her strange for asking him to do something so ridiculous. Rista almost loses her composure, but calms herself down and sweetly explains herself again. But Seiya almost makes her give in to her anger again, asking why she can't save that world if she is really a goddess. Rista explains that gods made many earthly worlds for humans, so it is only logical that humans must be the ones to save human worlds. Seiya asks if he can veto this job, or refuse, or revise the rules, but Rista doesn't allow it, and Seiya calls her selfish. However, thinking that Seiya must be panicking because he was summoned so suddenly, Rista asks him to say status, which would show his stats before him. But Seiya is a step ahead, and says property, just to be safe, and a magic menu appears before him that shows information about himself. After ensuring it is safe, Rista pleads with him several times, so Seiya says status, and his stats are displayed before him. Rista shows him he is truly powerful, and the only one who can defeat the Demon Lord G-Brand. Rista opens the magical gate to the world, and happily tells him to begin his journey, but Seiya says no, and she can't believe him. Seiya asks if she really thinks he's going to just drop in a dangerous world without preparing, and walks away. Rista tries to convince him, saying he doesn't have to worry as she will be with him, and can heal him if he injures himself. But Seiya deases her by pointing out that healers are just support characters, so she won't be of much help in saving the world. Rista's nerves pop as she tries very hard to control the urge to hit him, when she suddenly finds herself cornered by Seiya. He says he has certain terms, and removes his shirt, revealing 6 solid biscuits. Rista thinks her dream of an early honeymoon is coming true as she pictures herself in Seiya's arms. But she is left in the dust, as Seiya starts doing push-ups on the floor. He asks for some time to prepare himself. Rista can't wrap her head around what is wrong with her chosen hero, when she realizes she misread an important piece of information on his form. His personality section stated that he is ridiculously cautious. Later, Rista meets Ariadoa, the goddess of sealing, and complains about how Seiya is really weird and has locked himself in a vacant house to do push-ups. But Arya thinks that since they are dealing with an S-rank world, exercising some caution is necessary. She advises Rista to support Seiya by providing him with necessities like a toilet, shower, food, and a bed. She adds that Seiya might not like her acting like a goddess, so she should treat him like a friend. Determined to make it work, Rista thanks Arya for her advice, and rushes to meet Seiya. Rista barges in and is awestruck by his six-pack. She takes her time admiring Seiya's masculinity and then presents him with onigiri. But Seiya asks her to eat it first since she is a stranger, stating that the food clearly might be poisoned, and he doesn't want to take the risk. Rista drinks her pride and eats one, proving they are not lace. She magically creates the necessities for him, and she gives Seiya a mini figurine, telling him to ring it if he needs anything, but Seiya thinks the figurine might have a bomb hidden inside. A week passes, and Rista's soul almost leaves her body, waiting for Seiya to call her. He finally uses the buzzer to call her, and she rushes to his house and finds him coming out of the shower, and he tells her to knock next time. She asks how his training went, and they both look at his status. She is shocked to see Seiya has leveled up from 1 to 15 just by working out, and his overall stats have also increased. However, he says he is aiming for maximum power, but Rista freaks out, so Seiya says he is fully and completely prepared for this, and Rista thinks his catchphrase is weird, and opens the gate to the parallel world. She holds his hand, and the two jump into the portal, and reach the green meadows of the world, G-Brand. From there, Rista suggests they first visit the town of Idona to get Seiya some equipment. As they enter the town, Rista greets the civilians, and Seiya says he's impressed that she can greet people normally while she is dressed like an exhibitionist. Rista says she is using her magic to make her clothes look normal to the people there, but Seiya doubts it. Before Rista loses her mind, a compliment distracts her. It is from a little girl, Nina, and surprisingly, Seiya talks normally to her. They ask where the weapon shop is, and Rista hands Seiya a bundle full of gold coins to equip himself. At the shop, Seiya asks for 3 sets of armor, one for wearing, the second as a spare, and the third if the spare goes missing, but before he can waste all his money, Rista orders his armor and a sword. With his new equipment, Seiya is finally beginning to look like a hero. But Seiya is still worried about his well-being, so he visits a medical shop and asks for 30 smoke bombs, 50 medicinal herbs, and 50 healing potions. Rista's jaw drops when she hears his order and asks if he really needs that much. Seiya says that he doesn't know what kind of monsters they'll be dealing with, so he wants to be prepared. Nina, who had been listening to their conversation, tells them that even she can travel on her own to the neighboring town, as the area doesn't have monsters, but only harmless slimes. Seiya is unsure, so the girl gives him an amulet to protect himself, but Seiya immediately calls it a cursed item. Rista shuts Seiya's mouth before he blurts any more nonsense and hurts the little girl's feelings. Surprisingly, Seiya puts the amulet in his pocket, and Rista thinks he's not all that bad. They start their journey and encounter a slime. Seiya hides behind a rock, calling it a strange creature, and Rista explains that slimes aren't lethal at all, and any adult can handle them with a cotton swab. Seiya steps before the slime, with energy pulsating from his sword, and he attacks the slime with his atomic split slash, and sends the slime to oblivion. Rista thinks that was way too overboard for just a slime, but to make sure he can't resurrect, Seiya uses his Hellfire skill, and then his atomic split slash, and then Hellfire, and then his atomic split slash, and then Hellfire, and some more Hellfire, and then his atomic split slash, and another Hellfire, and one last atomic split slash just in case. Rista asks Seiya if he used his ability clairvoyance skill to see the slime's stats. Seiya says he did, and even though the slime's attack and defense stats were in single digits, he wasn't sure if he could rely on the information. Suddenly, they sense a dark aura approaching, and a barely clothed demon appears before them. She introduces herself as Chaos Machina, one of the 4 great kings of the Demon Lord's army. The Demon Lord sensed that a hero would be summoned, so he created an army of demon kings. Rista notices that Chaos is at level 66, which is much higher than Seiya. But before Rista can even strategize what to do, Seiya takes off, and she runs after him, not believing that he left her in the dust. Chaos thinks that Seiya is a fascinating hero for running away without thinking twice, and chases after them. Suddenly, Rista is hit with several smoke bombs, and Seiya uses the smoke screen to grab Rista and run away from the demon woman. Seiya asks Rista to open the portal so they can teleport back to the realm of the gods, and as Chaos is about to catch them, Seiya uses Hell's Fire to keep Chaos from reaching them. They jump through the portal, and the portal closes behind them. Seiya holds Rista's face delicately, and throws her into the wall to get her off of him, saying she is getting in the way of his training. He has decided to work out until he is satisfied, and won't come out of his room until he is finished. He shoves her out of his house and says he'll contact her when he's ready. It has been 2 minutes, and Rista anxiously waits for the buzzer to go off, but when it doesn't, she tries using a fortune crystal to see if Chaos had left. Rista is immediately taken aback when she sees Chaos directly addressing them, warning that she'll destroy the town if they don't return. She says she'll decapitate one citizen every 10 minutes, and cuts off a citizen's head to start the countdown. Rista barges into Seiya's room and tells him about the emergency, but Seiya remains calm, saying that time passes differently in the two realms, and Rista confirms that 10 minutes in G-Brand equals 16 hours in God's realm. He says they have time, and he is not ready yet. Just then, the globe glows, and Chaos shows them her next victim, who is Nina's father. Rista pleads with Seiya to stop doing his push-ups and save Gearbrand, but when he doesn't budge, she reminds him that even if he dies in the fight, he will be sent back to Earth and continue living a normal life. Chaos declares Nina as her next target, and Rista asks Seiya how he can remain unbothered, and reminds him of the amulet Nina gave him. Seiya stops for a minute to bring out the amulet from his pocket, and he calls it cursed, and blames it for their problems. Rista cannot believe that someone can be that emotionless, and says she regrets summoning him, and with her eyes welling up, she calls him the worst hero ever, and is ready to run out of the room, when Seiya's voice stops her. He says that if he dies, the whole town will be destroyed and eventually the entire world. He needs to build his strength to ensure he doesn't die, which is why he is preparing himself so thoroughly. By the time Rista turns, Seiya is ready to go with his armor and sword. She can't believe Seiya leveled up in such a short span of time, and his stats are now better than the demons. Seiya says he is fully and completely ready for this, as Rista gets excited and says she'll open the portal in the middle of the town so they can save the citizens immediately, but Seiya smacks her, telling her to teleport them outside of town, since Chaos might eliminate her next target upon seeing them. Rista agrees, but warns him not to hit a goddess on the head, and Seiya agrees, saying he might catch a strange disease. Rista gives him a death stare, and says she washes her hair properly. Meanwhile, in Gearbrand, Chaos is bored, and decides to cut the waiting period by 5 minutes. As she is about to eliminate Nina's dad, Rista and Seiya appear. Seiya attacks her with his wind blade skill, which she dodges, but it cuts off the dad's restraints. He thanks Seiya, and Seiya signals for him to run, so he picks up Nina and runs away. Chaos licks her lips and analyzes Seiya, but she is shocked after seeing Seiya's improved stats. Rista mocks her, so Chaos decides to go all out. She casts a spell, and a glowing mark appears on her forehead as she becomes jacked, and Rista realizes all of her stats have doubled. She wastes no time, and attacks Seiya with her huge sword, but Seiya's intuitiveness helps him dodge all of her attacks. Chaos thinks it's a hassle, and decides to unleash her special technique. She impales herself with her sword and says this is the end for Seiya, as her human form disappears and her true form emerges. Chaos is now a mutated bull with wings, and a shiver runs down Rista's spine, because Chaos is stronger than the demon lords in the D-class worlds. Chaos warns Seiya that his chances of winning are below 0, and charges toward him. Rista can hardly watch, and apologizes to Seiya, but when she opens her eyes, she is shocked to see that Seiya has blocked Chaos's punch with just one hand. Rista realizes that Seiya used a fake-out ability to protect his stats from being visible to anybody. Rista tries very hard to penetrate the locks on Seiya's stats, but when one of the locks calls Rista a pervert, she uses her ultimate ability to break through the seal. Her eyeballs almost fall off in the process, and more so after she sees his actual stats, which are 10 times stronger than the stats she saw in the realm of God. Rista knows it is impossible for him to gain such high stats in such a short period of time, and thinks Seiya has been using the fake-out ability from the beginning and already had a better status than Chaos, but he chose to train more just to be cautious. Rista thinks he is sick in the head, calling him completely unhinged. Meanwhile, Chaos is determined to finish Seiya and demolish the entire town, so she concentrates all of her magic into the air, but Seiya suddenly appears before her in the air, and Chaos can't believe he has the flight skill. Seiya runs his hand along his sword, and unleashes Phoenix Drive, severing Chaos's body into hundreds of pieces, while Rista can't believe what she's seeing. Rista hugs Seiya once he lands, and Seiya asks her why she is strangling him. She says she is happy, and also gives her nostrils the pleasure of sniffing him, but he shoves her away, afraid that he'll catch a disease from her. Rista says she is annoyed that Seiya didn't tell her about his improved stats before, but Seiya replies that he didn't want to risk the information leaking, just in case Rista got her brain opened and examined by a demon, Rista suddenly starts flirting and asks Seiya to protect her, but he outrightly refuses, stating that goddesses don't need any protection, and uses his sword to keep Rista from clinging to him again. The citizens of the town gather around them, and shower Seiya with gifts and invitations to show how grateful they are for saving the town from the demon. However, Seiya says he has some work to do, and picks a broom to collect what remains of the demon. Once he has gathered them into a pile, he uses hell's fire, and then again, and again, and again. Once he's finished, Seiya says it's time for the finisher, and uses his ultimate technique, Maximum Inferno, and burns down the entire town. The people panic and start running to save their houses and shops. Rista yells at Seiya to stop this madness, when a man comes rolling at her feet, and his bottom is caught on fire. Rista uses a blanket to extinguish the fire, and heals the man's bare bottom. By the time Seiya is satisfied, he has burned down the entire town, and the mayor pleads with them to leave immediately. They swiftly make their way out, and Rista yells at Seiya for taking such extreme measures, saying he looked more like a demon lord than a hero. They run into Nina and her dad, who stops them to give them a pouch full of money as a token of his appreciation. Seiya immediately snatches it, and demands more, which the dad happily provides. Rista yells at him, but Nina says that even though he's sick, she knows Seiya is a good person. After destroying the town they were supposed to save and ripping off a man, Rista feels more than embarrassed, and they quickly take off. After walking for some time, they rest, and Rista suggests they go to another town, but Seiya wants to go back to the realm of the gods to work out, because he thinks once the demon lord finds out that they have defeated one of the demon kings, he will send someone stronger to face them the next time. Rista says that he can upgrade his armor in the next town. Seiya thinks about it, and asks if Rista can just make him weapons like she did in the realm of the gods. But Rista replies that she is only allowed to use the magic of creation in the realm of the gods, so Seiya calls her useless and compares her to his medical herbs. He asks Rista to create the portal back to God's realm, making Rista wonder if she made a mistake by choosing a man like him as a hero. In the realm of the gods, Rista meets with Arya, and shares how frustrating it is to work with Seiya, who keeps coming back and working out, even though he has the power to defeat the demon kings. Suddenly, her eyes catch Arya's huge bosom, and she starts comparing her chest with hers and slouches, knowing she can't top Arya. She says she wants to save Gibran quickly so she can become a top goddess like Arya. Arya suggests that she must not see her as a goal, but Rista argues with her, and calls Arya a veteran who has summoned heroes to 300 worlds and saved them all. Arya tells her there was one world that she could not save, and she still regrets it because it was a B-class world, which should have been easy. She apologizes for making the conversation gloomy, and asks Rista if she wants more tea. Seiya unexpectedly enters the room, making Rista yell at him for his lack of manners, especially in a goddess's chamber. The teacup spills from Arya's hands upon seeing Seiya, and Rista can hardly hide her jealousy, thinking that Arya believes Seiya is attractive. Arya walks up to Seiya, and after introducing herself, she asks him about his reason for such a sudden visit. Seiya tells her that no matter how many push-ups he does, his stats don't seem to level up anymore. Rista is secretly happy since Seiya has reached his limits of working out, so she takes advantage of the situation and persuades Seiya to level up by defeating monsters. Seiya says it is too risky, and asks Rista to create dumbbells for him, but Rista tells him it won't help him much. Arya suggests they should ask another god to help Seiya train. That way, he will not risk his life, and the training will help him level up. Rista isn't sure if they're even allowed to do that, but Arya says she will allow it, and after some discussion, they settle on the god of the sword, Cerseus, to be Seiya's mentor. They meet Cerseus, who is practicing with his sword, and ask him for help. But Cerseus thinks a mere human won't be able to handle his rigorous training. Seiya openly challenges him, telling Cerseus not to blame him if he cries. Cerseus starts to get angry, but Seiya cuts him off and tells him to begin training immediately. They face off, and they begin to fight, and after Seiya blocks his attack, Cerseus is impressed by Seiya's skills. After the first day of training, Rista meets Cerseus in the cafeteria, and asks about Seiya's training, as Seiya has forbidden her to watch him train. Cerseus admits Seiya's skills are impressive, but adds that he still has a long way to go. After the second day of training, Cerseus looks a bit pale, and tells Rista that in just 2 days, Seiya has gained a terrifying amount of strength. Rista explains it is because of his double experience skill. Cerseus wishes he could use the power of gods, but he's not allowed to against humans. Cerseus has a slip of the tongue, revealing he has been losing against Seiya, but he quickly changes the topic. On the third day, Rista notices Cerseus sitting in a cloud of gloom. He seems to have lost weight, and when she asks him about training, Sirius has a meltdown and walks away, leaving Rista worried for him. On the fourth day, while Rista is seaweed shopping at the beach, she finds Cerseus hiding behind one of the seaweed stands. He finally confesses that Seiya is sick in the head. No matter how many times he says training is over, Seiya insists that he is not done and won't let Cerseus rest. Cerseus says Seiya has been making him practice day and night without rest or sleep, which is why he is so worn out. Cerseus is brought to tears when he tells Rista that Seiya won't stop until he becomes 100 times stronger than him, and Cerseus says Seiya makes berserkers look cute, and that Seiya is a super berserker. Suddenly, Seiya appears before them, making both Rista and Cerseus scream like little girls. Seiya asks what he's doing behind the seaweed stands, and Cerseus nervously says he was pretending to be a seaweed. Seiya declares they will practice today without breaks, which pushes Cerseus over the edge, and flings his sword into the ocean, proclaiming that he hates that long pointy thing. Seiya grabs Cerseus, and starts dragging him as he cries for help while Rista tries to stop Seiya. Just then, Arya arrives and informs Rista that a woman named Ishtar is summoning her. Rista soon leaves, and Cerseus continues crying for help. Rista meets with Ishtar, another goddess in their realm, and tells her about Seiya and Cerseus' training. Ishtar laughs upon hearing what is going on, and reveals that Cerseus was a human swordsman in his previous life before he became god, and even though his memories as a human are gone, emotions are deeply rooted into the soul. She then asks Rista to head to the next town with Seiya immediately, and explains that the demon lord has noticed their movements and sent in powerful enemies, endangering the next town. Ishtar has the ability of precognition, which helps her see the future. She tells Rista that the next town is Semel, where they will come across important people who will become allies of Seiya. Rista says she'll handle it immediately, and rushes to the training ground. But she is shocked to see Seiya sitting on Cerseus and punching him repeatedly, but Seiya clarifies that it is a part of their training. He asks Rista why she is there, and Rista informs him that they must head to the next town as it is in danger. Seiya agrees and says he has nothing more to learn from Cerseus, so he is fully and completely ready for this. But Rista looks at Cerseus, and yells at Seiya to apologize to Cerseus for crushing his spirit. The two soon reach the town of Semel, and find the citizens abandoning the city. Rista asks what is happening, and one of them tells her that the army of the undead will be arriving in their town soon, which is why they are running away. After everybody has left, Rista and Seiya roam around the abandoned town, and Seiya asks what the undead are. Rista explains that they are monsters that move even after they've lost their lives. They are like zombies, and defeating them with just a sword is difficult, but holy water can be used against the undead. So they visit a shop, and luckily the owner is still there. Seiya orders 1,000 bottles of holy water, and argues with the owner when he says he doesn't have that many. But Rista intervenes, and orders 10 bottles to go. They soon leave the shop and continue their journey to the church, where they'll find their allies. They reach the church, and 4 people are waiting for them. The priest welcomes them, and introduces them to Elyulu and Mash, the descendants of the dragon race. Seiya steps forward as the priest bows, and he pours the entire bottle of holy water on the priest's head, giving Rista a mini heart attack, but when they see the priest struggle, they realize he is one of the undead. He reveals he was hoping to attack Seiya once he let his guard down, but now he will eliminate them using his ultimate ability that he received from a demon king. Elyulu and Mash take a defensive stance, while Seiya asks the nun about the priest, who tells him that he arrived 2 days ago as a missionary. Rista asks Seiya to help their allies, but he tells her he has already immobilized the enemy, and when they look, the limbs of the undead start falling off. Rista is amazed as she didn't notice Seiya draw his sword, and she is glad his training with Cerseus has made him even stronger. Rista asks Seiya how he knew that the priest was an undead, and Seiya says since the priest was the oldest of them all, so he would have become an undead sooner or later, making Rista doubt his intuition. The undead interrupts their conversation, and tells them that an immortal army of 10,000 is heading towards the town, and will reach it by the next morning. Seiya says his purpose is fulfilled, as he only wanted the information the undead just delivered. He prepares to finish him off, and Rista knows exactly what is coming, so she grabs their allies and the nun and runs out of the church. Seiya suddenly casts his Maximum Inferno, and sends everybody flying from the blast. Rista falls face down, and the entire church gets engulfed in fire. Once outside, Eliulu and Mash stare at the burning church in utter disbelief, while Rista explains that Seiya focuses more on completely eliminating his enemies than on battle. The nun soon gains consciousness, and upon seeing the destruction of the historical church, she goes into shock and faints again. Eliulu and Mash formally introduce themselves to Seiya, but Seiya is more concerned about checking if they all are humans by pouring holy water on them. He even pours it on the unconscious nurse and Rista, just to make sure that the undead didn't change places with them while he was distracted. Eliulu and Mash think he's sick, and are creeped out when they see Rista and Seiya staring at them. But Rista and Seiya are just checking their stats. However, after seeing their average stats, Seiya says he doesn't need them, and when Rista tries to convince him that they will evolve, he says he so doesn't need them. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Cautious Hero. Let us know if you liked this recap and want to see more of the show. Till next time.